Started, Dr. Tom Morrison. I'll put a bunch of stuff up later with a little bit about what you're doing, your information. Doc on the Rock, which I am a proud client of.
Yeah.
How many times do you get your doctor to come in and talk to you like you do? And your approach makes so much sense to me about just the way you treat the whole body, and I never had that before.
Well, thank you, thank you. No, it's something that I've always believed in. I think it started out in medical school. Case Western Reserve really kind of fostered the idea of looking at the person as a whole, and I took the best from those situations and tried to incorporate in my practice. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. It's a one-time fee, and then it's a monthly fee, and basically I have access to you and I sometimes feel funny because sometimes I'll send you things that are because I consider there's you touched on a little bit yesterday. There's more than just a doctor. There's a friend in there, and I think that me being a fraud doctor, a fraudulent doctor of the radio essentially, where it all started. And I've told you my story about how Dr. Lou came about because there was no doctor for me.
Well, you touch on something that's very interesting from a philosophical standpoint as well as just ethical point. There's been lots of discussions amongst the educational literature for medicine about the patient-physician relationship and where boundaries are very important as well as respect to privacy. But particularly in a small town setting, when do those boundaries blur? And is it okay? And it has taken me several decades to kind of figure out that balance. And I have made mistakes in the past. But you'll hear me say things like, I'll call you up and we'll talk as friends. And then I'll say, listen, I'm worried about you as a patient. I want to move and talk to you about that. And then if you're ready to, you'll say, yeah, sure. And most of the time you'll say, no, let's talk about this instead.
Well, that's how I am. There's a.
Excuse me, I forgot to mute my phone.
You forgot to mute your.
Yeah, I did.
We're on with Dr. Morrison, Dr. Tom Morrison, and his practice Doc on the Rock. And we're in the small studio today. Actually, I'm going to be getting a larger green screen and doing a lot more. We're using the OBS software, which is a free a software program where we can I could be streaming this live.
That's cool.
If we wanted to.
That's very cool.
I don't know. I took the liberty of saying you probably didn't want it streamed live.
No, I'm comfortable either way. I trust you implicitly.
Okay. All right. So, the thing when you stream live, then you have to look for what people are saying. So at this point, folks, we will come back and do a live thing so we can ask questions, so we can bring the questions in. I've changed my philosophy kind of when it came to medications and things of that nature. And obviously you've found Munigold.
Yes. You shared it with me.
I shared it with Munigold.
That's right.
And the weirdest thing is Munigold is a all-natural product. It essentially, it's personal to each person. Like it affects different people completely differently.
Correct.
In other words, I'll take one of these. Sometimes I'll feel like a little weird, you feel off, and I'll take one of these and I'll be right again. Or if I'm going to a place where there's going to be a lot of people, and I figure there's going to be a bunch of people in there, and they're either smoking or they're drinking or there's other stuff going on, I'll take one of these because it works with your coating of your nasal membranes and all the stuff that if any outside entity is going to enter you, it's going to come through your nose and your mouth, probably, right?
Most
think
likely,
about it.
yeah,
Mostly,
yeah.
I mean, unless they're going to come out, somebody's going to run up and give you an injection.
Well, also eyes and then skin. If you
Yeah.
have a breakdown in your skin barrier, there's a very common entrance point. And then for sexually transmitted diseases, genitalia.
I don't have to worry about that.
So no, I think you're on to something. What you said is perfect. The fact that natural remedies do affect people very differently, and I think this recent coronavirus, this novel coronavirus that's been called pandemic, and is to a certain extent. Well, I don't want to politicize that. So to rephrase that, the coronavirus has shown us that vitamins, particularly C, D, and zinc, play a critical role in our ability to fight viruses.
Right.
So natural supplements like this definitely help. And NIH, or National Institute of Health, has a whole division of alternative medicine. And they have shown where some people get better for some reason, but they don't know why.
Right.
And it's not reproducible all the time, but it still helps people.
Right.
So the question is why? And I think in some ways, not only does it help our metabolism and our body, but it accesses something here that allows us to cure ourselves. Because remember, we don't use very much of this. And,
I can attest to that.
we all can. But when you look at monks, when you look at meditation, when you look at acupuncture, when you look at even aspects of homeopathy, people do get better. It's not reproducible. It's not something that we can see on a consistent basis as we can with some meds. But yet it doesn't hurt if you take it. So I've started taking your product as a supplement to what I normally take as vitamins, and I have noticed it has helped me on days. So it doesn't hurt.
Have you tried Calm Gold?
No, I have not.
I watched this happen last night. We talked about. I won't get into the personal side of it, but I gave some Calm Gold to someone last night. And of course, it was a younger person, and of course, I didn't get a chance to tell him not to chew it quick enough. So the first thing happened is he puts it in his mouth, and all of a sudden I hear crunch, crunch. And I'm going, oh, you're supposed to suck those. And he's, why? It's a cough drop. I always chew my cough drops. I said, well, this time. So he asked for another one, and then I gave him one more when he left. But I watched literally a transformation over. He actually ate 3 over the but in the second one, he ate 2 Calm Gold, and immediately his demeanor changed. Not drastic, but it was. He was literally at it, and I'll explain to you when we're done our show here, the details of it. But it was amazing to and I'm not pushing anything. I mean, I use these 3. I use the Inflamagold for inflammation because I have these trigger fingers. These trigger fingers, and it's been told by certain people that Inflamagold will help the inflammation in the joints.
I think the critical part of this for your people to hear is that there's nothing in the ingredients that are harmful, and there's nothing in the ingredients that I reviewed that interact with any medications, including the demonized Coumadin, including some of the blood pressure medicines, including the diabetic medicines.
Right.
So in that realm, it doesn't hurt to try.
Right.
And then if you find that it helps, then continue it. If it doesn't help, okay, don't do it.
Yeah. And I haven't really noticed like like a lot of drugs you'll take and you'll take it, and then as soon as you don't take it anymore, the symptoms come back and harder than they did. I don't notice that particularly. I was using Immunogold a lot during when there was the preponderance of a virus running around. And I've done some videos, obviously. The first one I did was right after ivermectin. And when I took ivermectin and got better, I think 3 or 4 days, I was maybe 5 days into it, I did a video. And I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Yes, I have.
The short one, the one where I talked about it being a parasite.
Yeah.
Now that's and I say in all my videos, like everything, I take in information. The information I give out is what I've heard, but belief-wise, I don't subscribe to any belief of anything except what I can verify, and then I figure there's a preponderance to kind of believe. I still never believe like, oh, I believe totally in this, or I believe in this source or that source. I listen to them all.
The nice thing about that documentary, and I call it a documentary, but where you took the series of your improvement with ivermectin and your battle with COVID, was that your opinion changed as time progressed, and you gained more of an understanding of what was happening to yourself as well as COVID in general. And I think we're even seeing that on a worldwide scale because, it's hard to swallow these changes in policies when really nothing's changed. I mean, everybody acknowledges the fact that the vaccines help you produce antibodies.
Right.
And pretty much everybody understands you can still get COVID. And that's
Or,
okay.
or that's been said.
No, you can't. I've had several patients. But the whole premise of the vaccine, as with the ivermectin, is not to be hospitalized. Not to get sick enough to where you go into respiratory failure and
Right.
things like that. And again, nothing is a cure-all. I mean, I've seen people with ivermectin not get better. Very few, but I have seen them. It exists. Same thing with the monoclonal antibody. I've seen people not get better with the monoclonal antibody. I've seen a lot of people get better. So,
Right.
so I think just like the Muna or Muna series, or Gold series, I'm sorry.
Your golden health.
Your golden, is that what it is? Okay.
Your golden health.
I mean,
I'll put that
I
on
think
the-
it's reasonable to try things as long as it's safe, as long as you're doing it with an education, with a knowledge
Right.
of why you're doing it. Why ivermectin and not hydroxychloroquine, or why not the monoclonal antibody, or why not some of the other antivirals, and well, can I do it with the vaccine? All these
Right.
are good questions to ask.
Yeah.
And
I mean, in a case, now I listen to a lot of different doctors, and when I see a doctor coming online and speaking, I usually look for an affiliation in their life somewhere else. I say, where are they affiliated with? Kind of, and I've said it for years. I mean, I've been a would-be philosopher for years with my Dr. Lou-isms and things like that. I always said, you've got to find out who got paid.
True.
Look around for who's getting paid. Usually when you go into a situation and the situation happens, if you want to find out who's really behind it, just look at who gets paid. Who made the most off of it. Chances are they maybe didn't cause it completely, but they certainly guided the vessel into the area where the situation could have happened.
The very old axiom that journalists use is follow the money.
Yeah, well,
If
I
you want-
didn't want to use theirs.
Yeah,
I didn't make that one up. I've said in my Dr. Lou-isms, I have one that's called, there's no cliche without truth. In order for something to become a cliche, it has to have happened over generations enough that it's been passed through word of mouth to different people, and then a penny saved is a penny earned.
What I hope for
Another
is
day, another dollar.
is that people continue to ask questions. You mentioned ivermectin, and we talked about Doc and the Rock in this setting.
Yes.
But as you know, I work in the urgent care as well,
Right.
and we've set up a telehealth where people can have access to develop or purchasing ivermectin
Nice.
for prophylaxis or whatever utilization.
You have to give me the information on that.
I will.
I'll put that up on the screen.
Okay, we'll have Bruce maybe come down too. We can talk.
Oh,
about
I'd love
that.
to. I'll be expanding the space a little bit, so
Okay.
we won't be on top of each other.
But during these conversations, it's fascinating because you do hear where people are coming from. And I've read this and I've seen this, but this doesn't make sense. And then they'll ask these questions like about prophylaxis and the concept of prophylaxis and is it appropriate or not appropriate. And then given the information with that conversation, they can make their own decision.
Yeah, I just want to make sure my microphone's wrong.
Oh, great.
Because we're not using headsets here.
Yeah,
so-
I noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, we can, but it's just
Oh, this is nice.
It makes it look a little better. And we've got the two microphones that are sitting here that are picking everything up, so we're in good shape. Yeah, the whole. I mean, I reached out numerous times to Dr. Boros, but he doesn't get back too easily. He doesn't.
Well, he started up his own cardiology practice there as well.
Oh, okay.
And he's really wanting to make sure that something's created that's consistent for the community. Mariners is great. Mariners Hospital and Fisherman's Hospital is fantastic. I love working there as well, and they provide really great service. They, unfortunately, are regulated by the state and by the federal government, and they're considered a critical care access hospital.
Right.
So they have to bill at a certain level, which can be very painful.
I know.
I know you know.
I still owe him money.
Well, and it's unfortunate because the men and women who work there are fantastic, and the services they render are fantastic. But it's nice having an alternative. It's nice having something that's more cost effective for the community. So I'm really happy about both places.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say that they didn't give me great care.
They do.
did.
No, I love working
But,
there.
$15,000 for the day was a little much. But
Yeah.
again, I mean, I guess they don't expect to get all that back. But there's still this lingering thing out there. I have to go talk to them about.
It's and they do have programs like a financial need
Right,
and things like that. So you do want to fill out those things, but it's a burden, and that's what you're describing.
Well, I mean, for me, I don't want to. A lot of this was cast upon us. This whole the way the society took to this COVID thing.
You're
I
talking
don't
about
even-
the pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm sitting here is because of that. I mean, I wouldn't be here. I had a whole other project, as I've talked to you about many times. We were building a musical city, and it was a plan. It was a dream. It was a dream to revive Dr. Lou's, which is a place for people to heal with using music and using a family-like environment.
Right.
And I get a lot of good and bad press down here from that. From the average person who comes here and understands that they come in and there's no pressure here. And I found that was the number one thing that my mother and father did in their lives. When you went to their home, there was never an ounce of pressure on you. You got to relax. If you wanted something to eat, you got something to eat. There was a swimming pool in the backyard. You could go there. There was a swing set out back. We lived by a baseball field. I just sold the house. It broke my heart to sell that house because that house was a foundation of, I think, a great thing, which was my mom's life and my dad's life. But their philosophy is that there was never. I mean, did they get angry with me when I would do things that were angry? Yes, but when other people came to their house, there was never once a confrontation. There was never an argument. There was never a fight. They were diffused immediately.
So you're trying to create that childhood experience here.
I did it with Dr. Lou's Place, the bar.
Okay.
I ran the bar using their philosophies. My mom and dad's philosophies were they cared deeply. And I used to be funny because my mom would be angry with me and she'd be yelling at me or something, whatever I was doing. I did her wrong many times as a child. I was a pain, the thing you sit on. But then she'd get on the phone and answer the phone and her voice would change to this, hello. And I'd sit there looking at her and say, how do you do that? Don't worry about it. And she'd come back at me, but it was her. She created a personality, and when my father died, there was a eulogy I wrote. I wrote his eulogy while he was alive. He sat in a chair, not too much, a little bit further away than we are, and he had congestive heart failure, and they sent him home to die. So I was there. Nobody knew how long it was going to take. Right. And he was like his body. He basically regressed into a point where he was almost like a child again. And I got to watch the first part of that. I had to go back to where I lived. I lived in New York at the time. I had to go back home, and 2 days later he died. And my aunt and my mother and they stayed. And I guess my brother was around, and they kind of took care of him over those last 3 days. I kind of felt guilty a little bit that I left. But at one point, he looked at me one time with these eyes and he said, I'm going to die. And I said, well, Pop, I said, everybody's going to die. And I tried to give him the young son. That was my first bit of fraud doctor advice. But when I watched the spirit just kind of leave his body, and for some reason, I was compelled to get up and go get a yellow pad, and I started writing. And it was as if I was writing, and he was speaking. And I wrote 2 paragraphs, two eulogies.
Have you documented your story about your brother?
About
this setting?
About the butterfly. No, I have not done that in this environment yet. It is an interesting story. That takes the next level. But those were the things that I see that I can bring, and I do bring with this place, and I almost didn't renew here, but I am going to renew.
Okay.
And part of the reason why I'm renewing is because there was a few people, certain people, who walked in and said, "You're not going to be here long."
So you want
Yeah. No, but no, that is like a. When I first started programming, I had a manager tell me, maybe programming's not for you. Maybe you're not capable of picking it up. When someone says that to me, like they say I'm a hack musician, so I'm digging into the instrument to go to that next level. It's an incentive. It's the 1, 3, 5. It's the one thing, 2 things, 5 things you're going to do to make what someone believe. Having someone not believe in you sometimes can be the strongest thing.
It's true, but you want to be careful, and this is just you and me talking in general, not just you, not as your doctor, but you want to be careful not to be defined by others. What you're doing for yourself ultimately, and that's okay. And I think you are, but it's a slippery slope, because if you live a reactionary life, like reacting to other people's feedback, it can be very daunting and very depressing. There have been recent times in my life where I thought I did a very, very good job. And when I moved on from that job, I realized, well, everybody agreed with you. Now, does that make me a bad doctor or a bad manager? No, it doesn't. But it does create a perspective of self-sacrifice towards that job or towards future jobs, and recognizing maybe I need to emphasize my personal life as much as I emphasize my work life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, because even though you think you're tremendously successful, maybe you're not. And that's okay. And so it's not taking what was said about me as a negative, because that's people's perspectives, and everybody's entitled to their perspective, regardless of accuracy. But it allows me to also say, well, wait a minute, maybe that wasn't worth it. Maybe it wasn't worth that extra time you spent because it wasn't recognized anyway. So maybe it's more important to balance the personal and the work.
Right.
For you, what you're doing is this is something you're very passionate about. So you're fine diving into your musical instrument, because for you that's also a release. For you it's a sense of accomplishment. The software that you're doing is fantastic, and I like how you do that too. But you're right, it's through the challenges that really spur you.
Yeah.
But just make sure that's not defining you.
I get you.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about the transition with. You've got the prophylaxis, COVID, ivermectin. I mean, I was a buyer of. I mean, I've given you. I've probably made you feel uncomfortable sometimes.
No,
I walk up and say, I love this guy because you saved my life. You did. There's no question. Throughout my life, many people have saved my life. I've been told by people without even realizing, what you said. And there was, again, going back to what happens here a lot of the time, people will come in and they feel comfortable. So what they do in the comfort environment is they'll share a problem that they might have. And my mother could tell you that you're the biggest idiot and you're wrong completely. And I've watched her literally, like fillet someone, not in a mean way.
Right.
But at the end of that, teach them they're wrong, they stood up and hugged her and kissed her and said, "Thank you." Because the truth doesn't always have to hurt. But I feel like you're doing that and have done that by you and Dr. Bruce and the way you handled the difficulties. I thought was just so outstanding. That's kind of why I joined up to Doctor on the Rock, because I said, these guys are the kind of guys, and your organization is the kind of people that you want to be around when things are good and bad.
Well, thank you.
Does that make sense?
It does. I do want to clarify. Doc on the Rock is just me.
I understand.
Okay, all right. And
but I kind of group you together,
I know
because
you do. You're not alone. You're not alone.
It's
but,
okay that
right. And that's fine. Also, because I do have a lot of different hats.
Right.
But Doc on the Rock was initially constructed to help people who own their own businesses and couldn't afford insurance, and that's why. Now, because when I initially would turn people away with insurance, I was noticing the interest wasn't as large as I thought there was. So about 40% of my practice filled up with that type of person. So then I allowed people with insurance to come in if I could help them,
Yeah.
and of course the practice is capped at 50 right now.
Okay.
Now in 4 years, 5 years, I do plan on expanding that number.
I would love to help you with some software and some
Right.
ways of facilitating ease of growing what you're doing,
Right.
because I think there should be a doc on the rock in every city, just like a Dr. Lou's place. I think there
I
should be
think-
an option for it.
I think it's happening. It's called direct primary care,
Mm-hmm.
and I think more and more physicians are realizing that the lack of money you make from that arrangement is compensated by the true patient-physician relationship you have, and it's not lack of money. I mean, the way I've set up the model is simply to be self-sustaining, because my main job is still ER urgent care, but in the future, like 10 years from now, that's going to switch,
Right.
because I'm personally not planning on retiring. I'm planning on changing my focus of my practice, but I love medicine. So
Right.
as long as this works, and as long as I have two hands, then I'm good to go.
I said almost the exact same thing to someone last night, where
Yeah.
I said, if I was debilitated to the point where my body didn't work, I really couldn't declare myself, like
Retired?
not even retired, but disabled.
Uh-huh.
Because this thing is where it all comes from.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like anything. I mean, if you're a carpenter, or your trade is with your arms, and you lose an arm, you're disabled permanently because and I believe totally I don't believe in this. Okay, well, you've decided your life going down a certain road, and all of a sudden something happened to you physically. You don't have to. You can find another thing to do, but you know what? As a society, we should take care of a person like that.
So create the distinction, the urgent care is offering people who have COVID or who wish to try to prevent themselves from getting COVID options. And the option is the use of this ivermectin, which is an anti-parasitic. But in Australia, Argentina, now Dominican Republic, South Africa, they've published really good literature to show its efficacy. So that's what we're promoting in that setting, and that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. I mean, now just to pull on that thread a little bit. I was arguing with somebody last night, not really arguing, but having a discussion, and I talked about being a person who believes there's always more than a story is going to have.
Mm-hmm.
How did we not know about ivermectin with its relationship to something like a COVID? How did that get by? I mean, all these people were experts for all years and years, and they made good money doing it.
Right. So when you look at the history of medicine, this is not new, and I do like historical perspectives. So we don't have to look that far back. If you want to look back in the 80s with HIV, antiretroviral medication, where that was really pioneered was considered off-label, if not sacrilegious to the medical practice. Remember, it was first made in Mexico. It was discovered that it works. There's a couple of movies made about the whole process.
I don't even know about that.
Yeah,
because I mean, it kind of, like, I would think that would be one of the most amazing. I mean, and there was obviously a social stigma to that whole thing.
Right.
I don't believe in that. I don't look at a person and look at their skin or their orientation.
Not going on
it's their
that,
own business.
But I'm not talking about that tangent. I'm just talking about pharmaceuticals.
Right.
So, because that's the question you asked.
Yeah.
So, again, there's a movie about it. Something. I'm sorry, I can't remember, but about an individual who developed HIV himself. He was not a nice guy. He went to Mexico, got treated, realized it worked, so started smuggling the medication into the States.
Oh.
I believe it was Arizona, maybe Texas. I can't remember now.
But
But it's based on a real story.
Yeah,
And
but who and you say follow the money, but somebody had created.
Well, he made a lot of money doing this.
Well,
because he was a drug trafficker before, so he knew how to do it.
Sometimes,
But my point wasn't that. My
bedfellows,
point was looking at the states, looking at at even the world, how it looks at medications or pharmaceuticals, there is a bias. And if it comes from, and look at two people who study law. If they study law in the Dominican Republic and have their JD there, and they study law at Harvard and have their JD there, right off the bat, you're going to assume the Harvard professor is much more brilliant, much more astute, much more
I don't
understanding.
think that way, but
well, I'm just saying that
yeah,
is the prejudice.
again, yeah.
That's their bias,
Right,
not
yeah.
even prejudice bias. And really, until the proof is there, until they create their dockets or their presentations, you don't know the truth. So with pharmaceuticals, if it's coming from a very well-established group, it's going to be more readily approved and more pushed than medication that may not be coming from an established group. So that's historical. That's the most recent
Right.
historical data. You can even go back further when you look at influenza vaccine. So when you look at the first utilization and development of influenza vaccine, it was very controversial in the way it was administered, who it was administered to, the documentation, the side effects. Now, they have improved on it dramatically. So now it's a vaccine that I take even. And I only recommend it to people who have had the flu before. Because if you've never had the flu and you're 50, 60, you're probably okay. But if you had the flu before, you're more likely to get it again. So I do that vaccine. But when you look at the 50s and 60s of when that vaccine was being developed, it's some scary stuff. So
There should be a story on that.
there is a couple.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then we have to. We're going to have to reference this in our talks because our show is going to be about putting coffee on myself. But the about that. So to continue.
So for COVID or coronavirus, that was now it's accepted that it was manufactured, and we always said it was because you don't go from point A to point Z. The mutations require many, many years, and coronavirus has been with us since the beginning of humanity. So we now know it was created, man-made, and
Do we know that for sure?
yeah, pretty much.
I mean, I know you always hear. I mean, that was considered a conspiracy theory
Correct.
at first.
It's not anymore.
But how do you, I mean, I really. I mean, I have this thing, and I might have talked to you about it before, called Truth Trust Party.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's the Truth Party. When this first whole thing started, I was going to go into politics.
Right.
When that happened, I decided to create a party because I actually ran for president in 2016. I'm on the docket.
There you go.
And I had it on the Pragmatic Party at the time.
There you go.
But it became the Truth Party, and I only called it a party because everybody does.
Right.
But focusing on the truth, and I must have put it out 100 times on all these. I realized I was shadow banned on because I'm a radio guy from years. I've been 15 years in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I have a radio show, WKDW in Florida, up in Northport. And I've been on the radio as a presence for almost 20 years, over 20 years.
All right.
A complete under the radar kind of person.
Right.
Every once in a while, someone will go, "Oh, I heard it does something on the Dr. Lou show," and I'll be like, "I'm right there," and they don't know who I am. But the point is truth and trust, and I said truth and trust or bust was my motto, and I used to put that up: truth and trust or bust. And and what we're trying to get to with my questions are about being able to find a place to offer truth and reestablish trust in ourselves first and our government.
So, establishing truth is a very big problem because the information that I share with my patients or within my practice or even amongst friends is information that I've read and absorbed. So the classic example is I'm hearing you talk to me now and I'm talking to you. What you think you say and what I think I've heard is somewhere close to what might be the truth.
The whisper down the lane.
Yeah,
thing, right?
yeah. And so the pursuit of truth is just that, a pursuit. What I think is what you also said was the whole concept of making good decisions, understanding where does this thought process come from, and then you being able to glean, well, that makes sense to me, or that really doesn't make sense, or you know what, I'm on the fence, I'm going to think more about this. And I think that's what I want to offer more. So going back to the COVID pandemic, Why did we not talk about hydroxychloroquine more? Why was it so politicized? Why was ivermectin just never discussed really openly?
Really, I mean, if you were to put that on one of these social media, that word would get you knocked off.
Well, and for a while, yes. And then, there's the whole vitamin D premise, which does have some validity to it. And then you have the monoclonal antibodies versus the plasma. We've now seen that the plasma doesn't work as well as we had thought it did, but the monoclonal antibodies work better than we thought they did. And then, of course, we have the vaccines, which do have side effects, but not as many as some fear, depending on which vaccine you get.
Well, we hope that the lack of the clinical trials.
Well, we don't know. We don't know.
And I said it many times. I really hope that what I fear, I'm wrong. I don't want to be right at all.
So
I don't want to be sitting there saying, I told you so.
So I could tell you that the Pfizer vaccine seems to still be number one in the sense that it does seem to respond, the antibodies that are produced responds to the mutations or what people are calling variants of coronavirus, so that's encouraging. And the side effect profile seems to be the lowest. Moderna is still number two. I am recently seeing in my clinical practice women particularly developing diffuse lymph node enlargement and lymph nodes within their breasts to the point of requiring antibiotics. I've only had personally 6 cases, but if I've seen 6, there's probably a lot more out there. And that's an unfortunate complication. Moderna has other complications associated with it, usually lymph node involvement, swelling, things like that. But not death, which is I'm encouraged by.
Our friend that just came in here took the Johnson & Johnson.
That one I would not recommend.
He had he said he had never been sick in his life.
Yeah.
Took it basically because he said he wanted his son to be feeling comfortable that he did.
Right.
He's an army veteran.
Right.
Joint pain, couldn't feel his hands. He came around here. I offered him Munigold. He didn't want anything to do with it.
But, and so there you go. That's what I'm talking about. So people need to be able to be comfortable with their own decisions and the reason for it, and not just out of a place of fear, which is what unfortunately everything's been politicized.
Right.
So, when we can go into detail about the efficacy of each of the medications, and one of my close physician friends said, we don't know if anything works. We don't know, and it's true.
Isn't that weird?
Have I seen ivermectin work? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I know, not only yourself, but with many others. But is it 100%? No, it's not. So it's important to know that.
Yeah, and it was funny because we helped get someone ivermectin in a band situation.
That's right.
That was a long.
Well, they were already sick.
Very sick.
They were already.
And they had
ICU.
been through chemo from a leukemia treatment.
Right.
They are back on their feet now, and they were using words like hospice.
I know.
And I don't like to be one to say, well, I helped. I loved this man because as a big brother, and he gave me more joy in my life than any brother I could have ever had. I just couldn't let him go.
Well, I'm glad he's back home. I'm glad he's walking about. And do I think that ivermectin played a role? Yes. Do I think the other medicines he received, the IV antibiotics, the respiratory support played a role? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's one of these things where I've had very intelligent nurses just shut me down about conversations about ivermectin, and that's okay. But they're coming from a place of fear or anger because they don't necessarily want to understand that there are other options out there. They want to just say, "Oh, there is no other options."
So we're getting to the end of this thing. We'll talk to you for a few minutes if you have time. Is in closing, it is a privilege, and that's why my band's called The Privileged Few. It's a privilege to be able to interact with people and to have them look and listen at what you say and do, and become inspired by it. And I think there was a guy named Nightingale, Earl Nightingale, who said he was trying to define the definition of success, and he said that the definition of success is obviously, like I believe, it's a personal thing, but it's in his mind it was figuring out a goal, and then going there and achieving that goal was in his mind a definition. Whether your goal is to go become a billionaire, or whether your goal is to teach children, or your goal is to go on stage and be a hack musician.
You're not a hack musician.
Well, there's an opinion. So, in closing, what is the summation? If you could say to someone, you're out there, you've been through this, from the doctor I love, and I trust implicitly, is there a message we can send to close this off, to say, here's how I would take a step forward, your 1, 3, 5, whatever it is, how to proceed forward from here, because we're all here together now.
Proceed forward
towards where we're going next, as a group, as a society, as a practice, as a family.
For individuals with personal goals, how do they obtain them? Or
I'm talking about from a doctor's perspective. How would you advise someone to think and proceed? Because you treat the whole body. How would you tell them to respond to what just happened to them? They figure this is a big punch in the forehead. They're on the ground now. They get up. What do you tell them from a doctor's perspective?
So, from my perspective, or what I've shared, is that if something makes sense to you, continue to ask questions. If something doesn't make sense to you, continue to ask questions. Realize from your own perspective, from your own understanding of life around you, from your own educational platform, what makes sense. See, a lot of people believe that education allows you to have complex, abstract thoughts, and that's absolutely not true. Education makes it easier to understand things. It makes it easier to process, but it doesn't mean you can't have those thoughts. So in whatever language you understand, have that idea or concept communicated with you so you can make better personal decisions. Don't allow someone else to make the decision. Don't allow any news source or any physician, whether you love them or not, to make that decision for you. I want people to start making their own decisions and allow it to be educated and not rhetorical. And what do I mean by rhetorical? That means if you turn on the TV and you hear the same exact thing you just said, or your friend just said, that's rhetorical. That's just being a parent. That's the, what was it that Peterson said? That's the idea having a person instead of the person having an idea.
I get that.
And that's what we want. I want more people to have their own ideas, because we are each so unique. It's the beauty of my practice. And everybody responds differently to medicine. Everybody responds differently to different approaches to things. So for one catch-all thing to be appropriate is ridiculous. And that's why you as an individual have to be your best advocate. So I guess that would be my advice.
There you go. So make your call, and again, I say take it easy, because that is the motto is you got to take it easy on yourself.
Forgive yourself.
The first thing you have to do is address this person. And you wake up with this person. You're a spirit living in a container, as I believe. My container is getting older. It looks a lot like my father. I've been through a tremendous life of hills and valleys, and like everybody. But my valleys are no more valuable. And the last thing I said to a young person last night, I said, your spirit is just as valuable as everyone else's you'll ever meet.
Good talking with you, man.
Okay, here we go. Everybody, we're going to stop this again. Dr. Lou and Dr. Tom Morrison. God bless you.